Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for tonight's installment of Movie Monday. Tonight we are discussing First They Killed My Father. Before we get started, I wanted to say a quick thank you to our community partners for this series, Dallas Video Fest, Legacy Senior Communities, Mosaic Family Services, Reach of Dallas, Refugee Services of Texas, SMU Human Rights Program, Temple Shalom, the Texas Holocaust and Genocide Commission, and the World Affairs Council of Dallas-Fort Worth. Thank you all so much for your ongoing support. Tonight, we are so excited to have a very special guest with us, Loung Ung. Loung actually spoke for our Upstander Speaker Series at the museum a couple of years ago, and we've been huge fans of hers ever since. But before I turn it over to our discussion tonight, I did want to mention that we very much encourage questions, comments during this program. If you want to go ahead and locate your Q&A button, it should be at the bottom of your screen if you are on a computer. It might be towards the top if you are on a tablet or other mobile device. So anytime you have a question, please go ahead and open that box and type it in. Charlotte will go ahead and incorporate those as we go, and anything we don't get to, we'll try to cover at the end. So before I turn it over, I wanted to introduce Loung, who is a best-selling author, activist, and co-screenplay writer of First They Killed My Father, which was a critically acclaimed 2017 Netflix movie based on her memoir of the same name. The film was produced and directed by Angelina Jolie. Born in 1970 to a middle-class family in Phnom Penh, Ung was only 5 years old when Khmer Rouge soldiers forced her family out of their home and into the countryside. Separated from her family, she was trained as a child soldier in a work camp for orphans. And by 1978, the Khmer Rouge had killed Ung's parents and two of her siblings. In 1980, she and her older brother were able to escape by boat to Thailand, where they spent 5 months in a refugee camp. And then finally, after settling in the United States, Loung served as a spokesperson for the campaign for a landmine-free world, a project of the International Campaign to Ban Landmines, and she's since made over 40 trips back to Cambodia. In addition to First They Killed My Father, she is the author of Lucky Child and Lulu in the Sky, a daughter of Cambodia reunites with the sister she left behind. And today she continues to share her messages of building resilience, healing from trauma, civic service, activism, and leadership in the US and across the world. She is a busy, busy woman. So I'd now like to go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Charlotte Decoster, Director of Education for the museum, and Loung Ung.
Thank you, Annie, for that wonderful introduction and as short as possible introduction to Loung Ung. What an amazing story right there. And Loung, thank you for joining us tonight. And I hope I'm doing my best to get as close as possible to pronouncing your name correctly. I apologize if I'm butchering it up a little bit.
You're doing a great job. Thank you so much. And it is a pleasure for me to be here. I'm a huge fan of the Dallas Holocaust and Human Rights Museum. And it was really visiting you all in Dallas and attending and being a speaker. There was one of the highlights of my 2019.
Oh, it was a highlight for us as well. Having you and getting to know you and hearing more about your story was so amazing. And for me, that honestly was the first time I really got to delve more into the events during the Cambodia genocide. I think for many people, this movie, First They Killed My Father, is their first introduction to the Cambodia genocide. And through that, they learn a little bit about these historical events. So this is such a key work. And as a survivor yourself, I wanted to kind of start off as we're waiting for questions from the audience to come in. I wanted to start off with asking, what was kind of that process like to write the book and this get this story into words and then writing the script for the movie? What was that like? Can you share a little bit with us?
Yes. Writing was such a different experience from making the film. And I shared, I think I'm pretty sure I shared it with Annie, but maybe not everybody else, that my field of studies in college was political science. And so I didn't grow up thinking I could be a writer. I wanted to be a writer. And I've always kept a diary and a journal of my experience and my memories primarily so my nieces and nephews would have something of their grandparents, would know a little bit of their heart, of their spirit, and also would know how much and how hard their grandparents and aunts and uncles worked to be here, but they didn't make it. They didn't make it, and they didn't live through the war. But the experience of turning the book into my journals into a book came about on April 15th of 1998. And on that day, I woke up to the news that the Khmer Rouge leader, Pol Pot, a man who spearheaded the Khmer Rouge genocide, where in a span of 3 years, 8 months, and 20 days, an estimated 1.7 to 2 million Cambodians would perish from starvation, diseases, hard labor, and execution out of a population of 7 million people. And in his last interview, the one that were often used on the day of his death, he spoke of how much and what he did for love of Cambodia. And I became so incensed and so angry, because love does not a genocide make. Love does not commit torture. Love does not kill. Love does not take children from their parents. Love does not hurt or harm. And for me, it was a process of wanting to tell my story of love, the story of my brothers and sisters, my parents, of my country and my history. And even with that intention, writing was a very solitary, lonely experience, and at times also very dangerous, because you're in it yourself and you're reliving the experiences and you're re-traumatizing yourself. I did, with PTSD, and it really was not a wonderful, fun experience. But making the film, being in Cambodia, of working with 20,000 extras and Cambodian artists and musicians and costume designers and Angelina Jolie and all these wonderful people coming together to tell a story of our heart and our spirits and wanting to tell it right. That was so cathartic and healing.
Yeah, and it shows the the results of it too, is that it's just become such a key movie for everybody to watch. But also look at the questions. This is my first movie discussion I've been in that so quickly so many questions have come in. So I'm going to delve right into some of those questions, if you're ready for it, that are coming in from the audience. The first one is, can you talk a little bit about where you were on your journey when you were writing the book, as compared, and you talked a little bit about it, but can you maybe go a little bit more into depth of the difference where you were as a person when you were writing the book as compared to the movie?
Yes. When I was writing the book, I was living in Washington, D.C. I was working at the Campaign for a Landmine-Free World as a spokesperson. So I was a full-time, passionate, out loud and proud activist. And so my journey in writing the book was really with an activist voice, with a voice that was really angry at the war, angry at Pol Pot and his last interview, angry at how much the world didn't know about Cambodia. And so and I wanted to tell a story that so few people know about. And I wanted to tell a story that my nieces and nephews didn't know about. They went to school in America or in France or in Australia or in Cambodia studying. In Cambodia, even in Cambodia, they didn't study the Khmer Rouge history. And in America, they studied Russian and Japanese and all, and American history, but not Cambodian history. And the journey of making the film, it was now many years later. I mean, the book came out in 2000. I started writing in 1999, and we made the film in 2016. And so now I'm a wife, I'm a friend, I am a great aunt. So not just nieces, my nieces now have children. And there's a lot of more of a feeling of legacy, of wanting to share the story, not only the story I wanted to tell, but the story we all could tell together. Like the legacy of Cambodia, the legacy of my mother's and line and her spirit, the legacy of my father's spirituality, and the legacy of their lines and the people in Cambodia. And so for me, that's a really good question. First, I don't think I've ever gotten that one, but I was making the film in Cambodia with a lot more peace in my heart, and and a lot of love in my soul. And so I was able to be in Cambodia. We were there filming for 4 months, working with so many people, and I was able to be still and to be present and to have gratitude and to also have joy because we're here. We were doing it, and we were all together to tell the story.
Thank you. So Erica asked, and this is very personal right away off the bat. Erica asked, "What is your favorite memory of your father, who's so central to this story?"
Yeah. My favorite memory of my father is just all these snippets of all these flashes of me sitting on his lap and listening to him tell stories. My father was such a great storyteller. He spent his early childhood as a traveling monk, where he could own nothing, had nothing but his bowl that he and a broom and a spoon and a couple of things he could carry on his body. And so he spent so many years wandering the beautiful land of Cambodia, and he loved Cambodia. He loved the colors of the country, the greenness of the trees, the redness of the dirt. He loved the brightness of the stars. He loved the stories that is so ingrained in our culture. I mean, we're a country of 2,000-year-old history with great mythology and vibrant cultures and beautiful architectures and soulful people. And my father would weave all of these into his stories. And my fondest memories was always of sitting on his lap on a dark night and sitting outside staring up at the stars and listen to my father tell his stories. And that's why I think when I was during the war, there was an experience I remember when I think a year into the war, when my father had a moment of stillness and I crawled over to him to sit on his lap because I wanted to feel that and to hear the stories. And then I felt his body tensed and I felt him, and I looked up and I could see that he was wincing. And it dawned on me that we had gotten so thin from the war that my sitting on his lap was causing him pain, that our bones or my bones were just causing him pain. And as young as I was, I knew I had to get off. I knew I had to go and sit somewhere else. And that memory is so clear to me to this day.
Wow, so powerful. Nick has a statement and question in one that I wanted to share with you. Nick said, "I love all three of your books. Every chapter made me cry. I'm a college professor in Long Beach, California, and I recommend them to all my students." As would I. I really recommend all of our docents. I recommend to read it. Every teacher I share this book with. So every teacher workshop, we talk about this book. Thank you for writing them. I remember seeing in an interview that you were working on a story about Krasue, Krasue. Is that something you're still working on? I hope so, because I would love to read it.
Wow. Thank you so much, Nick. That is so kind. I'm so moved when people actually not only read one of my books, but actually read all of them, it's amazing. Because when I published my first book, I really put it out there as a goal for 10 people to read it and to pick it up. And I am, because of all your support, and Charlotte and Nick, and I'm happy to say a few more than 10 people have read my books. And so I think with my first three books, with First They Killed My Father, for me, was a book about surviving wars and what it takes to survive a war. Lucky Child was again a book for me about what it takes to survive the peace long after the war was declared over. And I got the idea to write Lucky Child just many years later. And Lulu in the Sky was a book about what it takes to go from surviving to thriving. And so all of these books have come about because of an act of my activist heart. And then I decided I want to write a book about the as Nick was right, krasu, the krasu is actually a Thai word. In Cambodian, we call it the ab. So it's Niang Ap. And in the Philippines, it's the Panagal. And so it is a story of the mythical headless zombie vampire witch. So I have been working on the novel for a few years now, and it's my first book of my first fiction novel. And I am learning so much and just learning how to write. And I'm still working on it. I just finished my first draft. So yay, it's taken me probably about 4 years now, and I just finished my first draft. And so I'm still working on it.
Oh, that sounds so fascinating, and I would love to read that too. I can't wait for it. That sounds amazing.
Thank you.
Maria has a really great kind of combined question. How do you maintain a fond memory of all the beautiful things of Cambodian culture after experiencing such a horrid genocide? And then kind of connected to that, also, how do you do this? Keeping those fond memories from a distance as now an immigrant to the United States.
But I have so many fond memories of Cambodia because I've been back to Cambodia so many times now. I dare say probably for the first 7 or so trips to Cambodia, I was walking on the land with my heart broken the whole time, and with memories of traumas and suffering and just tears streaming down my eyes pretty much all the time. So much so that everywhere I went in Cambodia, I had to always pack a pair of dark sunglasses, and I would just wear my dark sunglasses everywhere I went. And it's taken me a really long time of returning to Cambodia and realizing that I get to make new memories. I am now an aunt. My sister is a grandmother. I have the families that my parents left behind have grown and have their own families, and together we have come to remember them. We have had ceremonies and to honor their spirits. We had gone back to their villages and had Buddhist ceremonies, and so it has been being able to go to Cambodia and to make new memories, and to make memories of love and joy, and to incorporate my family and my parents with these new memories, because I know they're not gone, but their spirits are very much still in Cambodia. And when I walk on the land of my father's temple and sit where he once sat there to contemplate life, I know he's there. And so I'm so blessed to be able to make these trips, and I'm able to have this, I think, same kind of contentment and stillness in America, because it's the same spirit. I am so grateful to be in America as an immigrant, as a refugee, as a daughter, as a sister, as an American citizen, as a voting American citizen. I just voted last night, so I am proud to be here. I am happy to be here. I love it here. I love it here because America allows me to be all of that and more. That there are sectors of America and maybe segments of a few Americans who may disagree with me, but you know what? The laws and our culture and our history have always been on the side of people who want to expand themselves and live life to the fullest, and also be kind. And so I actually am able to hold my fond memories of Cambodia and America in all the places I travel to.
Oh, that's so great. And it's always so interesting to see it from an immigrant perspective too, right? That it's different a little bit as an American. I have to ask the question that everybody wants to know. Angelina Jolie, what was it like working with her? How was it like finding out that she had interest in your story? And how closely did you get to work with her? I'm sorry, I had to ask it.
It's good to, it's wonderful. She and I, Angie and I have been friends for close to 20 years. And she was in Cambodia in the late 90s filming a movie called Tomb Raiders. And as a human rights activist, somebody who knows so little about technology and nothing about video games, I had no idea what Tomb Raiders was all about. And also because I was working all the time, I very rarely had time to go see movies, so I didn't really know who she was. And this was before she became uber famous. And when she was in Cambodia making the movie Tomb Raiders, she had picked up a copy of my book and read it, and then called me up on the phone. And I was very shocked because, one, I didn't know who she was. And then I found out, I knew about her later because of her work in Cambodia, of her work with UNHCR, United Nations for Human Rights, Commission for Human Rights, of her love for Cambodia. So that's how I got to know her, and not as a movie star, but as an activist, as a humanitarian, as a really kick-ass woman, as a woman whose heart I trust and who has great integrity. And so we've actually been friends for 20 years. we're very close. And so when she called up a few years ago and said, let's make the film together, I knew there was nobody I trusted more to make this film with. We ended up writing the script together, and then we ended up going to Cambodia and spending many months together. And now we see each other all the time. And so I just trust her so much. And I knew her love for Cambodia and her desire to not only just to tell the Cambodia story, but to also tell the story of love of a mother to her children, of a father to his descendants. Her desire to tell the story with integrity was something that was very important to me.
Yeah, and that's kind of interesting that you're bringing that out, because you're both such strong women. Do you think that helped, having a strong female voice as a director, bring out your story? Did you think that helped?
I think we do. I do. I think being strong is very helpful indeed, because she was able to recognize also not just the strength in the physicality of a child going through war and learning to become a child soldier, but the quiet strength of a sister, the strength of a hand, of holding hands, the strength of a certain look that women friends, I think, can give to each other, and you just know you got each other's back. And so I think that definitely really helped. And also we're both actually very physically strong. We were both very, Angie and I were both very physically active. And so that certainly helped, but definitely the strength of our friendship, the strength of our love for each other and our love for Cambodia, and our desire to make this film, not just for us, because she is one of the biggest movie stars in the world. She does not have to do this. And I need so little in life, and I already have my books. So I didn't, if I was ever going to do it, I was going to do it with the right person. It was not going to do it at all. And so the strength of knowing what you want to do and why you want to do it has really, I think, helped steer the vision of the film.
That's so amazing to hear that connection too. It just makes even the movie so much more powerful too. We have another great question coming in from Kathy, which is a little bit about the end of the movie, when we see the end with the Vietnamese coming into the story. And Kathy's question is, do you consider the Vietnamese your liberators? And why do you think the Vietnamese invaded Cambodia?
Well, but the Vietnam went into Cambodia because the Khmer Rouge had been, first of all, the history of Vietnam and Cambodia goes back many hundreds of years. And they are neighboring countries. The Vietnam invaded because the Khmer Rouge soldiers had been going into their borders and then having skirmishes and then killing the Vietnamese. And then, so the Vietnamese retaliated and came to Cambodia, and they stopped the genocide. They defeated the Khmer Rouge and stopped the genocide. Whether the question of whether they were liberators or invaders, really, I think it's up for histories and scholars to decide, and also for individual human beings to decide when they learn more of the history. For me, it's enough that they stopped the genocide, that they came in and they stopped the genocide and they defeated the Khmer Rouge and chased them into the jungles of Cambodia. And because of that, of my 9 family members, 4 of my siblings and myself were able to walk out of the killing fields alive. And for that, I will always be grateful.
And that is such a powerful scene at the end there too, that a little different type of question coming in from Michael, and being a Holocaust and Human Rights Museum, this is a topic that we quite a bit talk about, is forgiveness. Actually, one of our educators is going to have a whole presentation on Holocaust and forgiveness. So in that sense, to you, how do you forgive those who killed so many in Cambodia? And it's very complex during the Cambodia genocide, right? Is that the perpetrator lines are much different than in some other genocides as well. And so can you forgive? How do you forgive?
That question for me has not something that I've dealt with a lot. Maybe I don't think I'm in a space to forgive those who committed murders and killed my parents. And I don't know what happened exactly to my father. To this day in Cambodia, a country the size of the state of Oklahoma is littered with over 20,000 mass graves. A majority of the people in the graves, over 1 million skulls, have been accounted for, and they are somebody's loved ones, fathers, mothers, brothers, and sisters. And most likely not CIAs and not traitors and not enemy of the states, because many of them were children, many of them were wives. And so I am not in a place where I've even begun the journey of forgiving those who committed the murders. The journey I'm on right now, and have been on for many years, have been really trying to forgive myself. That is a harder journey on so many levels. And I understand as an adult intellectually that what I did to survive as a child, I did because I had no other choice. I was 8 years old and I stole food from a hungry woman who later died. I fought with my sisters and then caused my mother to suffer and to be in pain. And then I was trained as a child soldier, and fortunately for me, the war ended before I could take a life. But I have no doubt in my mind that I would have, because I was that hungry, I was that desperate, I was that vulnerable, I was that scared, and I was that without hope, without cause, without voice. And yet I wanted to survive. I wanted to live. And then I left after the war ended, and I lived. I left my sister and my brothers behind, and I didn't see them for 15 years. And when they wrote to me during those 15 years, I seldom wrote back because it was too painful to be in that space, to miss them. When one, I couldn't go back. I ended up being in America, and America and Vietnam ended up staying in Cambodia until 1991, and the enemy of our enemy was our friend. So my passport that when I became 18, I was able to get, allowed me to go anywhere in the world, with the exception of Cambodia and Cuba, which were 2 countries that were boycotted. And so I couldn't go back to Cambodia until US normalized diplomatic relationships with Cambodia. And so all the guilt that I did in the war and after the war, and that I am still working to forgive myself. And that has been a hard journey. And so I'm hoping that when I'm able to do it, that I will be able to deal with other things.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. That is something that is so hard to comprehend for somebody who has not gone through what you went through in genocide and And so thank you for sharing that, because I think that's important for people to hear and understand too, that that is part of the survivor's experience as
Can I
well. So,
share that also that for me, coming to America and having spent years in talk therapy, with friends therapy, with writing therapy, logotherapy, which I learned from one of my all-time favorite writer, and the book that was on the book that's probably did more than anything to save my life, which was Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. That book not only taught me to write about my experience and use it in a therapeutic term, but also taught me and showed me why I needed more, and why, again, the purpose of my life, and or the journey to search for that purpose. And in America, I've always been very concerned with our belief in the larger culture, that the healing journey, or the journey we need to go on forward to heal our traumas, has a destination, that we got to get there before we can start our life, that you got to get to this goal before you can start. Junior has to be off to college before you start your activism work. You got to get to this, maintain this ideal goal weight before you go out on a date. You got to run this fast before you start running. That we are constantly waiting for that, to reach that destination before we go on. And I share what I just shared about guilt, and my guilt, and the journeys that I'm still working on and traveling on, is to let people know that you can dual exist. You can go on with your life and still work on yourself. You can find joy and still be in pain. You can eat really wonderful food and still save some and then donate some to others. That we can do so many things at once, and we don't have to wait until we are, quote unquote, healed in order to live a full life, a rich life, a vibrant life. That maybe, possibly, I may never heal my broken heart. Possibly, maybe, I may never get to the place where I forgive the murderers of my parents. But dang it all, they are not going to stop me from living my full life. The soldier are not going to silence me from living and speaking my loudest. And so we don't have to wait. We can start, and we can live our full life now.
wow, I cannot agree more, and such powerful words. I almost don't want to deviate from it. It's such a strong message. But we do actually have another really great follow-up question from Michael coming in as well. And something we talk about again with the Holocaust quite frequently, but that's not brought up maybe with Cambodia. So I'm actually really interesting to hear a little bit about this too, is denial. Are there people who do not believe that the Cambodia genocide happened, and speak to you about it, that don't believe in the information that's given in the movie?
There are people who are still in denial, that I don't think they think nothing happened. I believe that from what I read, that there are people who believe that something happened, that the war happened in Cambodia, but it wasn't the Khmer Rouge or the people perpetrating the crimes against humanity, war crimes and genocide against its own people. That it's maybe another group, that it's maybe the Americans or the Vietnamese perpetrating these crimes. And that even if there are 20,000 mass graves and so many skulls accounted for and so many lives lost that we know about, that the numbers have been inflated, and that there actually maybe not that many people who died. There are also people who will argue with me whether the sky is blue or the sky is pink today. And for me, my thing has always been, if you are going to believe in something, I mean, and you do the work and you do it well, that is, that for me, that is my purpose, that's my conviction, that's my voice. And for those people who don't believe in things, I challenge them, show me the science, do the work. You can't just some crimes against humanity, war crimes and genocide is not something that is left to just anecdotal words only. I mean, we have science, we have stories, we have We have documents to show people what happened. And so yeah, there are deniers. But fortunately, there are 5,000 or more teachers in Cambodia who are now teaching the history of the Khmer Rouge genocide. There have been students who are now reading the stories of the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia. There are parents who are now speaking of their story to their children. There are grandparents who now are alive and are old enough to share their heart and their stories with their grandchildren. They are the truth tellers. They are not only the storytellers, but they are the truth tellers. And we have them on our side.
Kind of building up on those truth tellers. We have a question from Maria coming in. Her family as well fled genocide and faced it, and she is the first generation literate. And she also wants to get that story out there, either by writing a book or and leaving that legacy behind, telling that story. Is there any advice that you could give her about getting that story of her family out there and so that people are aware what happened to her and her family?
Yeah. A writer writes. A published writer gets his or her work published for various different reasons. So I started writing my story for my nieces and my nephews and all the descendants of my parents. And then I decided to try to publish my work because as an activist, my words and my work I was going to use them as vehicles just to talk about the larger issues of war and peace. And so for me, that was the drive. And for Maria, I am so grateful you're here. I'm so great that you survived and you want to tell the story. Start with your family members, speaking to them, speaking to your community members. You can start by just getting your words out in the local newspaper. I still believe so passionately that we have power and can speak truth to power to our local communities, to groups like the Dallas Holocaust and Human Rights Museum, to each other, and then to get your other work published. It's a matter of researching and finding out what you need to do and put together in terms of synopsis, the treatment, the first 3 chapters that you need to send an agent, to find an agent. So those are all the commonalities that you would have to do in research, like every other writers who want to get their stories out. But just know that it all starts with your heart and with your story and with your conviction and your belief and your passion. And then it starts there. And then go halfway through the journey. After that, you gotta sit your butt in the chair for many hours. And then you discipline yourself to tell the story you want to tell and finish it. Be the person who will finish your story and then put it out there. I hear so many people who want to tell their stories, but they lack the discipline of sitting themselves in a chair. And that's what we have to do. We want to tell our stories and to get it out there.
I think that is the best advice out there. I want to really turn a little bit to the movie itself. And once the movie was all done and you watched it, what was the scene that you just said, wow, this is the key scene that really sticks with me, that I want people to see? And that is like, these scene, every movie has that, that grabs everybody. What was it for you, it being your own story? What was it in the movie? What was that scene for you?
For me, it was the scene of the family sitting together for dinner. And I went into the watching of the movie, working myself up, my courage and just sort of my heart to take in the story of the war and to not be afraid of the bombs and not to be in shock of the war scenes. But when I saw on screen the family of 9 sitting together at the table having dinner, oh, it just broke my heart. And it still does when I think about it, because that was what I've always wanted. That was my dream for so many years. And before the war, we were always sitting together, the 9 of us, for dinner. My siblings and my 3 sisters, my 3 brothers, my father, my mother, the loudness of passing food around and eating and speaking over each other. And that for me, that was home. That was family, that was love, that was Cambodia. And to see that on the screen, and I think because of what's going on now in our world, and families are not able to get together for Thanksgiving to have that kind of dinner, I think, I think a lot of the people out there, I think they realize now what this means, and how much we miss that when we don't have it. I haven't had it since I was 5. And so I missed it a lot with my own family. I am so grateful and fortunate that I married to a family, a large family. My husband is one of 7. I was one of 7. I was one of 7. And I loved being from a large family. And my husband is one of 7. And when we get together with my in-laws and all the families, it's 30 people, 40 people big. We're so huge. And we are really missing it this year. And I'm missing the get together this year. So for me, that the Sina family was the most beautiful and the most heartbreaking. With that said, can I just also share, I do believe, and doctors I'm sure have studied it, and if they haven't, they should, that the heart is the strongest muscle in the human body. And for as many times as it may break, it has the ability and capability to heal with support, with love, with kindness. But for as many times as the heart breaks, it has the ability to heal.
Yeah, I think that's important. And well, you're also a person that embraces that. And that probably helps in the healing process too. With that is are you normally a person, is that something that is part of you, that you throughout everything that you've been sharing is such a positive outlook? Do you seek for that positivity?
I do, I'm fairly joyful, and and I'll share this with your audience, that when I have a glass too many of wine to drink, I laugh. I find everything funny. And so, yeah, I mean, instead of collapsing into tears, I laugh at everything. I am so grateful to be alive. I am filled with gratitude for life, for my friends, for the sun, for everything I have. It's because I had lost so much. Coming out of Cambodia, coming out of the war, there were many, many things I didn't understand, many things that confused me. But one thing I knew, even as a young person, I knew I wanted to be a decent human being. I knew I wanted to be a good person. So I try to be decent and good in my life when I'm driving, when I'm with friends. And I'm not aspiring to be great. I'm not aspiring to be, I'm not aspiring for fame or fortune. I just want to be a decent human being. And that has allowed me to go to sleep at night. And I think when you are able to be okay and to be kind, and you can go to sleep at night, that you open your heart for joy to come in, for light to come in. And when you are not doing that, then you allowed and put yourself at the vulnerabilities for darkness to come in. And I know what it's like to have darkness in your heart, and the kind of darkness that made me wanted to take my own life when I was a teenager, the kind of darkness that made me believe that if I cried, I would never ever stop. The kind of darkness that wish I could just go to sleep and never wake up. I experienced those darkness. And the work to let light in is so much more beneficial and so much better for not just me, but my community, my family, and our world.
Wow, thank you for sharing such, very personal feelings and things that you've gone through. I wanted to let people know we're nearing the end of our wonderful conversation here tonight. So if they have questions in, as now would be a great time to get your questions into Q&A. And one of the big final questions that I really wanted to kind of get through is, why is this movie important to you? What message do you want people to get from this movie when they watch it? What is it that they should get out of it?
No matter who you are, color of your skin, the language you speak, the food you prefer, we all share the same desire and dreams. I think as women, as people, as mothers, as sisters, you want to love, you want to have the ability to raise your family, you want to just have the ability to achieve your dreams. And my parents didn't bring me into the world not knowing they would not be here to raise me. All they wanted, I believe, was to be here to raise me. And I hope people who watch it will see the film and know that it's not just Cambodia, it's worldwide. We all want that, the ability to raise our families in whichever culture, wherever you're from, wherever you're at. And so that we are the same, that our loves are the same and very common. And also that what happened in Cambodia didn't just happen to Cambodians. It didn't just happen to my family, but it was a war against humanity. It was a war crime. It was a genocide. And when something like this happened, we all suffer. When our world citizens suffer the worst act of man's inhumanity to man, we all suffer spiritually, we all suffer physically, we all suffer emotionally. And we must realize that our connectedness to this is also something that we could use to make the world different, to create change in our world. Because as much as there are acts of man's inhumanity to man out there, the best of man's humanity to man also exists. It is in us. It is in our world. And we just need to choose it. We need to act it. We need to know we have the power to make a difference, the power to change the world for the better and for all of us, not just for others, for all of us.
Wow. It almost makes me quiet for a second, and I'm not a quiet person, but that is such a powerful and such important message, right? And I think this is why this movie, captures everybody. So it's that importance of that message that you just shared with us now. Well, I want to thank you for having this conversation and sharing some of those very deep and personal as well about yourself and about the movie. Thank you so very much for joining us tonight and having that conversation.
Thank you so much. And to all the people who joined us tonight, thank you so much. I'm very grateful. We've got so many things that we can all do with our time, and you chose to be here with us. I hope you check out the Dallas Holocaust Museum, Human Rights Museum, as I have, and know that we do all have the power to create change in our world. I cannot stress this enough. Our world is not going to change on its own. We need to stand up for each other. We need to stand up for ourselves. We need to vote. Because as I've actually just put it out there a lot, and it's been picked up in one of my quotes, but voting is not only our right, it is our power. And we need to use that power to make a difference.
I almost hate to spoil that by saying anything past that because I wholeheartedly agree, but I do want to say thank you one more time to Loung Ung for joining us tonight. We so appreciate you taking the time to be here. Since you gave us such a nice plug, I will really encourage everyone, if you haven't already read the book, First They Killed My Father, please, please do. And of course, Loung's other books as well. We look forward to your next project as it comes. And I hope everyone has a great evening. Please stay safe, stay well, and we will see you next time. Thank you so much.